is our artist in residence at the moment, and we're absolutely delighted to have him with us. And Ian is the winner of the RDS Student Award 2012 and finished NCAD in 2012 as well. So he's very, very prolific artist, both as a student and also as a practicing artist. And his work as a painter, you were trained as a painter, but his perception of the environment, you'll see through these works here that he's going to show you today, and his talk is very much influenced by, I suppose, the mindset of a painter. And you often find that, actually. The work very much deals with our habitat, our environment, our relationship with the environment, interactions, and also, I suppose, how that's not necessarily mediated but constructed through, our history or thought, philosophy, etc. Yeah. So yes, and the work itself often takes the form of external installations or external sculptures, video projections, sound. So it's quite varied. But I think it's very evident the sort of painterly quality that's in that work and that sensibility as well. So without further ado, could you please welcome Ian Nolan.
Hello. So hi, I'm Ian, and I've been here at the model for about 3.5 weeks now, I think, which is about the length of time it came to think up any work to do. But so I suppose today I'm just going to go through a few things. It looks like a lot, but I don't know, just to give you a general overview of the kind of stuff I'm into, and perhaps what the residency has been like, and about the upcoming exhibition in April, an anatomical chart of love pains, and have a little sneak peek. So I don't know, maybe you could get your opinions, or lack thereof if they're not very good, or like if they're unpleasant. But anyway, sorry. So let's see where to begin. Me. So anyway, as Marie was saying, I graduated from NCAD just last year with a honours degree in painting, which loosely translates into not having painted in about 4 years, and have kind of gotten sucked into a somewhat black hole of video art. But let's see. I'm from Leixlip in Kildare, and I suppose I have lived there my entire life, and only started to commute into town into Dublin when I was about 16, 17, 18. And the difference between Leixlip and Kildare is Leixlip is suburban, but there's also, you go a little bit outside and it's just complete wilderness and farmland. And so then to travel by train and see the farmland side change into an urban environment, the difference was really struck me. And I think that's kind of where maybe my interest in different environments and how they can construct the types of individuals or relationships you might find between people, each other, and environments came from. So after college, I took part in a few exhibitions. This one actually I took part in while on Erasmus in Utrecht in the Netherlands. It was just an exhibition a few of us put on in a kind of a squatted gallery. It was kind of fun because the gallery was actually tiny. It was literally smaller, I think, than this stage, and there was very little we could do. So what we decided was we wouldn't actually show any work, and we just took the gallery, and it was just a dilapidated old cafe, butcher type bakery, that's it. And we just made it into an absolutely pristine gallery, and this was the poster we had of it. It was just the outline, but I think they appreciated it anyway. It was turned into like a top-notch white cube. But here's a few more images anyway from different exhibitions that have happened since college. This one was in St. Mary's Abbey in Dublin, done with the OPW. And here's one that just actually finished up there, I think last week or the week before, in a place called the Backloft. And there was my piece was just a series of televisions dotted around a cafe they had. And people would get up and sit down on screen in the televisions, and they'd talk to each other. And so if you went to the cafe, you could sit down and you could eavesdrop on their conversations. And the longer you spent listening to them, the more you could kind of pick up on related themes and topics between the conversations. So the whole piece kind of became about the kind of conversations that cultural events like exhibitions or situations like cafes can generate, which is kind of representative of a lot of what I do. Is when you encounter a piece, it isn't so much that you encounter a piece and you see it and you think about it or you talk about it and you walk away. It's more, the longer you spend with it, the more acquainted you become with it, and the more different aspects of it might become apparent to you. I suppose it's kind of inherent in every work, really, that kind of quality, but that's what I try to bring forward most, is the constantly getting acquainted and the kind of the change that occurs over time with work. I'm also involved in this group called ArtHouse, which we set up just outside of college to, first of all, try to find a studio for ourselves, and also to exhibit and produce work and get a bit of a creative flow going between people. And we've done various pop-up exhibitions just outside around the city, and these are two images from one that we did on Culture Night. And just in the background there, you can see that big coloured thing up against the wall. That's a 58-foot painting I did on bin bags. And I just draped it across the wall, and it was really funny because I thought the offices that I was draping them across were empty, but then all the people just ran out and it's like, where's all our light gone? What have you done? And so like, generally when you... and also I think I covered up the front door to somebody's house, and she was trying to open it and tore a hole in it. So, yeah, working outdoors does have its kind of curious encounters. Here's a couple of images from an event, a graffiti event that the ArtHouse group did with a bunch of 30 11-year-olds from an Educate Together school in Smithfield in Dublin. So it was basically, we had a day-long workshop with the kids, and we gave them spray cans. We also gave them paint, but they weren't so much interested in the paint. They were kind of more interested in the spray cans. And it was just 30 maniacs just going nuts at these big sheets of MDF. And so they wrote really nice messages. One guy wrote Hugo Chavez everywhere. You can kind of see it in the top left of this one here. And other people wrote peace and believe and various things. And it was nice because it literally looks, by the end of it, looked about 30 years worth of graffiti built up on the one canvas. But what we did then is we were going to cut them up into individual pieces so that they can be hung on these partitions, these wire partitions, and you can rearrange them and create your own images from them and patterns and group them according to whatever logic you see fit. So it's kind of trying to get people to maybe consider graffiti aesthetically, maybe, or to just consider it in different qualities of it that might be inherent within it, as opposed to it just being a thing slapped up on a wall that's kind of funny or mean. So the RDS Student Art Awards, I know these are a great opportunity. There's a number of awards on offer. There's drawing, there's print, sculpture. It covers all the different fields, including, and this year for the first time they had a residency award with the model. And well, to apply for it, you had to fill out a thing, you know, my work is about this, I'd like to come here because, and just, I hadn't ever been to Sligo, but I was kind of, I'd seen, you know, photographs obviously of Ben Bulbin, and I'd heard about the surfing and stuff, and just the notion of the dynamics in the landscape, the geography involved, and the way that it was shaped, and the impact that mountain ranges and the ocean currents and all, it drove me absolutely wild. The prospects of different situations that might arise. And so I wrote the nicest application thing that I could, and sent all these images off, and obviously it must have appealed to the guys at the model, because they accepted me. But the images here are taken from my installation for the degree show, which I also submitted to the RDS, and it was a series of televisions intermingled with objects taken from the outside. And the objects were arranged in the same positions that I'd originally found them in the outside world. And the televisions were dispersed between them, showing images of the same objects as they existed in their original habitat. So when people came in, they were presented with these kind of shimmering images of these objects, and there was sound as well. There were birds and trees, but you'd be looking at an image from the countryside and you'd be hearing the city, because there'd also be interventions I'd carried out in the city on display in there. And so there was a dissonance between what you were looking at and what you were hearing, and it became quite immersive. And I found people doing weird things like having picnics in the middle of the exhibition, and just sitting there for hours on end, which I had never really encountered before. Anyways, and so it was a nice kind of experience, because it would root you into place. You'd feel completely immersed, but also the images you were looking at and the sounds would transport you somewhere else. And then when you leave, you would see things which reminded you of these images, like the leaves here you can see just there, and also the logs that were painted and stuff. And so it kind of just made you reconsider the potential in an environment aesthetically, or what have you. So I just have a little video here of one of the pieces, which was what was exhibited at the RDS, and the video is taken from the installation. But what happens is colour descends down all these steps. You can kind of see it happening now. And so these were is basically just the impact that the introduction of colour into a space can have on your perception of it. These are just close-up shots of steps in various places, and I just mixed up the water and poured it down the steps, and the water blended on its way down and completely transformed the entire situation. It was a nice piece to have in the exhibit, actually, because a lot of the images were quite static and there were very subtle fluctuations, but when this occurred, if you spent long enough sitting in the place for it to occur, the entire atmosphere in the room changed, because particularly from the colour from these, it would wash over the rest of the room, and you just got this kind of aesthetic thrill from it, which was kind of nice. But and actually, the bottom television screen there goes really well with Tchaikovsky. But here's a couple images anyway of the works that were shown, the interventions, and this is where I would kind of say that that while I wouldn't paint traditionally, maybe it's a kind of a painter's mindset that impacts on the way the work develops. Because like, if you take something like Monet and his paintings, it shows a certain quality about the environment that isn't obvious when you look at it, but can be expressed through the painting. And I think, I don't know, these images anyway, the impact that they have on their surroundings is more significant, I think, than the objects themselves. It makes you consider just the idiosyncratic nature of what could be considered a blank landscape, like these green leaves here. You could be looking at it, and it could, like, you're walking along your day, it's kind of, it's white noise, but then something would interrupt it and make you reconsider the objects that are surrounding you and the tiny little details that they're composed of, which I suppose just in order to operate, we have to block out a lot of these things, but to be reintroduced to it in a different kind of way makes you reconsider the potentials of the environments you're inhabiting. So, see, sorry if I'm ranting a little bit. Not too sure, but this is my dog, Colleen, who does most of the thinking and most of the work. She's very in tune with the environment. She likes to look very closely, and I remember, like, I'd be sitting down and I'd be stressing over notes, or I'd be doing my thesis, and she'd come up to me, hassling me for a walk, obviously, and it kind of just made sense, because I thought, here I am dividing my time between spending my time doing these notes and these essays and things, but then my dog is here and she's saying, get out, do some shit. So this is why I have my hat here, which is one of the things from my studio I always have with me, and I generally I go out on a walk and I'd be watching her and she'd be off running, and I wouldn't be really paying attention to where I am or what I'm doing, but slowly over the course of my time spent in a forest, say, walking with Colleen, I would start to get vague impressions, and it's these kind of little clicks of inspiration that eventually lead on to work. Like, here's one thing that I made here, which is, I think, something pretty unreal anyway. I just got this piece of chalk. I didn't know what I was doing. I left it on a plate outside for the month. And I haven't got a clue still what's going on, but it stuck to the plate, which is absolutely insane. I can't make heads or tails of that, so this is someday going to become something worthwhile anyway. And so this kind of bizarre thought process that I haven't really figured out yet has led on to external installations like this, where I kind of salvaged a whole load of pipes from a disused construction site sort of thing and made all these different kind of telescope structures which charted the course of the sun throughout the day. And you can see here in this image, they were all spaced differently according to the lengths of the shadows cast by the individual telescopes at given times of day. So what you ended up with was this kind of teardrop-shaped installation, the whole position of which was determined by the object's relationship to the sun, and those objects then became mechanisms which would kind of connect you with the sun, because I figured the sun is a pretty obvious and unbelievably common thing, come to most experience of most life on the planet. So I was just trying to find ways to make objects become mechanisms to relate you to your external environment, to make you maybe consider your relationship to them. And it's also led on to weird kind of sculptural assemblages, which I'm not going to explain because that's just weird. It's an egg cup sitting on some pencils. And external intervention sort of things. And so this pile of muck is actually my favourite piece that I've ever done. I went out at like 6 in the morning, 5:30 maybe, just when all my neighbours were starting to wake up, and I started to dig a hole. And so they were getting into their cars and they're turning on all the lights, and these big headlights just turn on, and I'm sitting out there outside the house digging up a big hole in the garden, filling up big bin bags with rubbish and carrying them up the road. I think they're pretty much used to this strange behaviour at odd times of the day for me by now, but at the time it seemed pretty sinister, and I just kind of left this pile of muck sitting just up outside the church on the main road outside my house. And the whole reason I was even doing this was because I was making external sculptures and trying to use them as reference points to the sun and to different objects or different places. And the town council were coming up and taking apart my sculptural assemblages and throwing them into the ditch. And this upset me because I thought these were quite pretty, and it was also stuff I was working on. And meanwhile, they were digging up the ground and leaving big piles of muck everywhere to lay down some UPC lines. So I decided to take it upon myself to dig up piles of muck and just leave them lying around as well. It's kind of an ongoing antagonistic relationship that we have. Like it's really funny. It's like CIS or something, CSI. I go and I'd do something outside and I'd just leave it and I'd walk away, and I'd be walking by the next day and there'd be a town council car sitting there with a few guys in high-vis jackets rooting through the place trying to find clues. And so anyway, I left this pile of muck there, and I was sitting by the bus stop just photographing it, trying to get a good picture. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and then this happened. And then her friends noticed it, and then this happened. And this is kind of, I was hiding behind a bin photographing them for about half an hour. And they were just sitting there staring at it, going all clueso on it, trying to figure out what was going on. They couldn't quite understand why there was a pile of muck, or who would leave it there, why it hadn't been cleaned up, where did it come from. They were making all sorts of speculations. And I kind of eventually walked up to them and I was like, what's going on with the pile of muck, acting all innocent? And they're like, I haven't got a clue. Do you know anything about it? I don't know. I was just sitting down there and I noticed this pile of muck there. I thought it was really ominous, so I started photographing it. Like, yeah, who would do such a thing? And I was like, God, I don't know, weirdos. But and so they stayed there for ages, just staring at it and talking about it, and it became this complete event in their day. And I'd say they went home later on and started talking about the pile of muck they came across that day. And so, like, it mightn't have made any sense to them, but it made them think a little bit about things that they would encounter as they're pottering along, and it made them, I think it just interrupted their kind of day and made them think, which is generally what I think is the most important thing that I get from doing anything. Which brings me to the model and the residency award. This is a picture of an avocado, which I relate to in many ways, and a kiwi, which I also am quite fond of. But yeah, I don't know why I have that actually. But to sum it up, it has a great view. That's a view from the studio. Beautiful photo. And it has a huge studio, hell of a kitchen, and memory foam pillows, which I've never encountered and which still freak me out. Like you'll press your hand against it and your handprint will still be there like 6 hours later. It's intimidating. So I arrived here at the beginning of, and I'll get off the, I don't know what image to have for, I'll have this. I arrived here in February around the 4th or 5th, I think, and it was a pretty great way to arrive as well, because arrived late in the evening with a whole load of baggage, and there was wind and there was rain, and I nearly got blown off the platform as soon as I got off. And I traipsed up to the model then, and there was nobody here but Seamus, the director. And so walking up the steps up towards the model, which literally looks like the house out of Psycho or something, especially with the wind and the rain, and the freaky streetlights with the trees waving. It was terrifying. And I go up and there's a single light coming out of a window, and Seamus is sitting in there on his laptop doing work. And I'm banging on the window saying, "Let me in, Seamus, let me in, it's cold, please." And he takes me up anyway, and I get settled in pretty well. So I had no particular clue as to what I was going to be doing here. Originally, I thought I'd just come up here and start hassling the town council here as opposed to in Leixlip. But then I was asked about this anatomical chart of love pains, which is an exhibition to take place here in April. And would I like to do something for it? And I tried to act all calm, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do something. Sounds great." And really, I was completely terrified, because it's a piece of text from it's a single chapter from a book by a man whose name I actually can't remember. That's the one. And it's pretty good. In the text, he's talking about the anxiety and the pain that he's going through after a lady called Fuson has refused to see him anymore, has cut off contact with him. And in the text, he's trying to use this kind of diagram of the body and different points where pain is felt to explain how he's felt regret and anxiety and jealousy, and how it's consuming his entire being. And so the brief for the exhibition was that we had to respond to the text in some way and present the work in April. And my approach to things generally is to become acquainted with it over time, sort of thing. So I decided I'd devote this residency to actually really getting into the text and understanding it. And for a little while there, I think I actually kind of became him, because I didn't leave the studio and I stayed up there and I rooted around and regurgitated the same ideas and the different points of view on the text, and literally went completely insane trying to work this out. So it's been a pretty intense experience of just being in the studio working and things. But I have kind of come up with a little piece here. It's all to do with a little bit to do with memory, I think. I ended up playing with projectors and stuff and layering them up, kind of like as in a room gathers memories and time is repeated, and the more time progresses, the more distorted memories become. And so eventually the original memory, you're remembering how you remembered a memory after a period of time, and the original day's events become confused and distorted and mixed, and you don't represent the original anymore, was what I was kind of thinking of. And that's the impression I was getting from the man in the text, was that he was spending his time dwelling and thinking and regurgitating the thoughts and ideas. And I thought, God, eventually, if he just stayed in that apartment and kept going over these ideas, he'd have they'd eventually mutate and become something completely alien to what he ever once knew. So anyway, I made this freaky hut in my studio and took a video of the projection at work. Anyway, the sound's a bit intense. I also layered up the sound, so there's about 7 or 8 layers of sound here and 7 or 8 layers of image. And yeah, I'll just give you kind of an idea where it's going anyway. That sound you're hearing is actually literally just me dragging my feet in the studio. It's just, yeah. So yeah, anyway, that's a little kind of sneak peek. That's what I kind of produced while I was here. I know it's a freaky piece to be in the same room as, because particularly with those sounds, it's just the frequencies in the room and the reverberation off the walls and the squeaking of the shoes. And actually, I was talking there in that sound piece that came along with it, but just you can't hear it after a while because the originals have become so distorted. So I know there's some interesting ideas bouncing around with it anyway, and the intention is then to kind of use March to make the actual work and refine it a little bit, and the exhibitions to take place in April, and I'm scared shitless. Pardon my French. So any questions? I'm sure there are probably loads because that was a really hectic presentation, but yeah. Anything about the residency or the work processes? I'm really fond of Monty Python and other things. I've also got some really interesting facts about penguins and platypuses. But anyway, anything at all?
I just like when two people go through an incident and months later they both tell the same story but it's different. So they're kind of remembering something and it becomes distorted. It'd be nice if someone else remembered and he met them later and got their distortion and see how different two stories are. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but no one else is in the room with you, they can't help.
Yeah, it's the thing is that he is completely isolated in the text. He almost talks to one person towards the end of it, but the situation is that he can't go out and tell anyone because actually the lady that he's mourning, having lost her, is actually a lady he was seeing on the side, and he's gotten engaged to another lady behind her back, and so I don't think that's socially acceptable. And for a while there, I was really angry at the guy. I was like, he has absolutely no right to be feeling so upset and to be so moany. But then I went to the library and read a lot of self-help books, and I actually said, he's going through pain, so I have to accept his pain, and empathy requires understanding, kind of thing. So yeah, he hasn't got anybody to find to reference or to try to remember what the specific thing is.
Conscience versus moral.
He's literally like he keeps collapsing on his bed. So he's literally like, I imagine him as occupying his own world where he never leaves it, and he goes over and because he has no way of expressing it or talking it out with people. So I was kind of just worried about him, what would happen if he just stayed like that and never got past it. Yeah. And I became him for a little while up in that studio, so there was a lot of paranoia going around. There's weird sounds you get here at night. I can't explain it. It sounds like there's a gate or something constantly opening and closing in the model somewhere. And I remember one night sitting up, it was about 3:30 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep because all I could hear was the sound from outside. Although I was told then that apparently one of the employees here likes to just walk around at night, but no, that's probably a lie. Never mind.
There's
yeah.
a really spooky Masonic lodge just a couple of doors up the hill.
Here?
Just it's only a couple of doors up.
All right.
Freemason's emblem in the gate, it's green gate.
Well,
just to make it feel even more uncomfortable.
Well, I've only a couple of days left to go. It should be okay. Lots of locks and security. I don't know. I think my granddad was in the Freemasons, actually. I'm not too sure, though. And I have a friend, Colin, who's obsessed. You ever hear that thing about Paul McCartney? Apparently he was in the Freemasons. There was a Freemasons conspiracy, and he died in a car crash, and the Paul McCartney we now know is not him at all.
Masonic construct.
Yeah, I know.
I heard Lenny Henry's in the Freemasons as well. Seems a bit spurious to me. But I heard that, I don't know, 10 odd years ago. And then my brother's in as well, so I don't talk to him.
So if there are no any questions about the work or anything, or
Your early photos, were they with that greenery?
yeah.
Were the flowers painted on?
That's the thing, actually. I forgot to mention it. These jokes. No, I actually went out and physically painted them.
They painted the leaves.
Yeah. It would usually just be weeds or something. And it started off just painting patterns onto the. Actually, I think it's pretty much stayed as just painting patterns onto them. A lot of people were thinking that it was photoshopped, or something like that. But usually acrylic paint. I don't know why. When I started off, I didn't really think about it. So it'd be usually acrylic or poster paint, a few layers of that. And depending on how strong the leaf that you're painting on is, like these fellas are really strong. But there are other particular types of leaves that just crumple immediately under the weight of the paint. So it would oftentimes depend on what kind of material you're painting onto. And it can change a lot when you're just wandering about finding things. There was an interesting thing I know, because I kind of got a bit anxious at one point because I thought the leaves were all going to die and I was actually just committing murder. Didn't matter so much with these guys because nobody seemed to mind weeds dying. But there were a few instances where I got a bit anxious. But what I noticed is that the leaves that have been painted on, they usually die and they fall off. But then by the time that happens, new leaves have kind of sprung up around it and replaced it. It's kind of it's just an interesting encounter.
What's some sort of connection? It's like there's some sort of false environment. Do you see a connection to your man in the room creating his own sort of false environments?
Yeah, it's all kind of constructing the environment in your head, sort of thing. He's in the process of constructing this freaky environment, self-destructive kind of one. And with these ones, it's in your head again, I suppose. It's altering your perception of things, and that's all kind of a mental thing, and you project that then, and that influences the way you interpret the environment from then on, kind of thing. So yeah, I think a lot of it is the external influence impacting on the way that things click. Yeah. And it's an interesting process to kind of get involved in, I think. Yeah.
So do you think from what you're it's like what was driving you to start with was the idea of how do we notice what we take for granted. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how to I love the pile of dirt in the street because that's getting people. I mean, we sleepwalk, don't we, a lot of the time, and just getting yourself to notice what's going on around you, but then getting other people to notice as well.
You see that I find
Quite
it funny.
challenging.
If people staring at a pile of dirt, but every day they probably step around the dog shit and don't stop and stare and be.
But they know how that got there. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Oh yeah, the important thing is to be nowhere to be seen when somebody comes across your stuff. Like this piece here on that you can see now in particular, it takes time to make these pieces. This took about 6 hours to do because there was a lot of leaves on that yoke, and it was actually my first attempt, which is why there's loads of paint on the walls as well. And that's still there to this day actually. So that's graffiti, but or vandalism. But yeah, so you'd be there for hours on end painting away, and when you're doing that, people will come by and stop and talk to you. And that change, their experience of the work isn't the same then. They get to, they know who's done it, they see it in the process of happening. Oftentimes you end up talking about why you're actually on your hands and knees on the street painting leaves. And so I think their experience of it, it's a lot of fun on the one hand, but they'll walk by it then and it won't impact on them as much. Whereas this same image actually appeared on Facebook about 2 days after I did it, and it was one of my friends who didn't know I was doing this. He just popped it up, and he had this big rant underneath it about what a kick he got out of it, and so that was really nice. It was the way that it impacted on him to completely come across it without any reasonable explanation. Really made him think and gave him a bit of a thrill. The whole way I came across this project actually was there were two things. One was going to my nan's house in Dundalk. We'd be driving along and we'd go around the corner and suddenly there'd be a field and it would be just red for as far as you could see, or it'd be yellow. And the bang I literally got out of just seeing so much colour and not expecting it, and it being so defined really it resonated with me in some way, particularly because I was struggling at the time. Will I keep painting or will I not keep painting? What on earth am I doing? And the next thing which kind of impacted me on a certain way, actually I'll get out of this for a sec, I'll show you, is I was at a house party and then the next day I woke up and found these puddles outside, all green and red, and it turned out the night before apparently I'd gotten a load of food dye and gone to town on the puddles. And see, I hadn't known I'd done this, so I was experiencing this thing having never seen it before in my life, if you kind of get me. And I got such a thrill out of it, it was unreal. So I just went out and this is the very first work I ever did in this kind of area. Was I went out and I just filled all the potholes around with the coloured water, and people did get it. Incidentally, these potholes were filled in like a week later. So this work, which is entitled Interruptions, it has a really broad kind of application. There's lots of different ways to interpret it. It can be very political, it can be social, it can be aesthetic, and it can be experiential in many different ways. I absolutely hate it because it's kind of, you could devote so much of your time to just following these ideas and doing it again and again and again, and in so many different ways. So it's kind of one that I return to maybe on a bi-yearly basis, maybe. Also, after spending a few months on your hands and knees and in really inhospitable environments painting on objects, you kind of get tired. And after a while, especially in town, by the end of it, I actually had like a shake when it came to the thought of having to go into town and paint. Not because there was any hassle or anything, it was just because I knew I would have to be lying on the street and I would have to once again explain my presence to the police when they walked by, and I'd have to explain my presence to the council, and then I'd have to explain it to everybody, and Yeah. sorry, a little bit of a tangent.
I like the what's called out of context thing, because I live in a rural area, and suddenly when wheelie bins came out, and you're driving along, and in the middle of nowhere there's a bright blue bin or a bright yellow bin, they were actually quite distracting, because I never got around to photographing as an out of context situation. And now I've become immune to them, so the shot doesn't work anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah, originally when it was out of context, it just upset me, but now I've become immune, so I wish I'd photographed them at the time.
Well, see, you do become accustomed to things, which is why I think it might be another reason why whenever I'm making an installation or a piece of work, I always try to think of how it can fluctuate or change over the course of time. These change over the course of time because they'd last a couple of days, they'd be gone. And the piece I'm planning for the anatomical exhibition will change over time, because by walking into the room, there'll be cameras somewhere in the room, I suppose, and they'll record that day's events, and then that day's events will be reprojected into the room the next day and recorded along with that day's events. So by actually even walking into the room, you're going to change the ambience of the room and alter the exhibition from that day forward. So by actually stepping into the room, you've changed the room and the exhibition. And so it'll be a constant...
Is that going to build up in layers? And is it going to, will the first layers fade, or is it going to accumulate?
It will accumulate, but what happens is kind of a curious thing. Now, I've only done up to about 8 layers so far, just myself, and the first layer and the second layer, they blend perfectly. It's grand, and you can hear both layers individually. Third layer, they all blend, but you notice that the first layer has gotten a bit distorted and discoloured, and the sound is also getting a bit strange. And by the fourth layer, or the fifth layer maybe, the original layer is almost completely distorted. You can still see like a really kind of weird, undefined image or shadow moving throughout the space, and the sound from that day will be intermingled with so much other sound, regurgitated, that it's almost indefinable. But what I've noticed is that, say, like the recordings I've made are about 10 minutes long, and there just occurs natural gaps in between all the layers, and suddenly the first layer will just pop out, and then it'll be just taken over by another layer, and it becomes difficult to tell which occurred at what time and where it happens. It might be curious because with the exhibition going over such a long period of time, I think it'll be open for 63 days, and it'll be open from maybe, I don't know, is it 10 a.m. till such a time, 5:30 every day. It's maybe 8 hours, 7 hours. So it's a long period of time over the course of the day, and it's a long period of time over the course of the duration of the exhibition. So I think patterns might emerge. There'll be periods of time where there'll be lots of people in the room, and the exhibition will become quite hectic, and the layers will be many. And then there'll be other times where there'll be nobody in the room, and it'll just be the sound from outside that'll be layering up, and the light in the room layering up. But also, then you might just have 2 layers going, then there might be 16 layers. And I'm really excited, because even myself just recording myself, initially I just walked around, just did my usual thing in the studio and just recorded it and layered it up. But after a while I realised the camera was there and that everything I did would have an impact. So at one point I just started singing Val Doonican songs and doing a jig. So people might begin to behave in particular ways, knowing that their actions are being recorded, or that they're going to have an impact or become part of the exhibition. So.
Would it be obvious that people are being recorded, or are you going to keep it secret?
Still tossing that one up.
Apart from us, we know.
I know one of my friends did an interesting piece, and he decided to have he was recording it, and he decided to have the camera really obvious so people could see it. But then people got stage fright, and people were very rigid. And on the one hand, he was upset because he was hoping people would act naturally, but then on the other hand, he also wanted people to consider that experience as individual to them. And so I think I'm kind of stuck in the same problem, whereas it might be good that people know the camera is there. It might be a bit sneaky otherwise. But then it might also be nice if they didn't have the distraction of the camera present, so that they could consider the room as kind of their own personal experience without outside intruders. So I don't know, I'm still tossing that one up.
I wonder if that depends on if there's something for them to react to apart from the camera. I was looking at this artist called Camille Utterback. Do you know her stuff? She's a new media artist from Canada. And she does very painterly video stuff, and then people come into the room and their movement in the room creates how that responds. So they leave traces, and then the next people who come in interact with the traces that have been left. So there's videoing them, but it's not actually showing them as themselves. It's showing them maybe at most as silhouettes, but often just as marks or colours or blobs. And so that takes away people's self-consciousness because they've got something to interact with apart from themselves and an empty room. And I think they forget then that actually it's them that's creating the work.
Yeah, their attention.
They get so caught up in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if that makes a lot of difference. Whereas if you were just in an empty room with a camera, that's a very self-conscious.
Yeah, it's not a really natural experience kind of thing. You feel like you're under interrogation or something. So I think having objects in the room is obviously a must because Seamus said so, and I tend to agree with him. But what was it? The kind of object I've been trying to think about, because it'd be good to have an object in it that somebody that could interact and behave with. One of the images that keep recurring in the text is the bed, and it's kind of like the centre of the universe, and it's also a place where people, like, at night you'd lie down and you'll go over events in your head, and you'll think about things before you fall asleep or wake up. So even the inclusion of a bed in the room might be interesting, but yeah, I don't know. So, but I think it's definitely just to have an empty room and a camera can be a bit of a confrontational experience for people, or something, if that's the right word. I don't know.
Thanks very much for your talk.
Not to worry. Thank you.